Win the First Hour, Mornings That Dominate Your Day. Written by Ronnie Rowland. Published by Growth Literacy Lounge. Absolutely. Most people don't lose the day at 2 p.m., they lose it before they ever leave the house. That first hour? It's not just a time slot. It's a tone setter, a thermostat, a throne. It determines whether you lead the day or chase it. But far too many people stumble into their mornings like a boxer entering the ring mid-fight, disoriented, defensive, already behind. The problem isn't time. It's ownership. The first hour slips away not because we're too busy, but because we haven't decided who we are before the world tells us who to be. That's where this book comes in. This isn't about waking up at 4:45 a.m. to drink lemon water and run marathons before sunrise. This is about alignment. It's about building a life that starts with intention, not interruption. A morning that reflects who you're becoming, not what the world expects. James Clear said, "Every action you take is a vote for the type of person you wish to become." This book is about casting those votes early, before the noise, before the demands, before your energy gets divided. In the pages ahead, you'll find a blueprint. Not for productivity, but for identity. For designing a first hour that acts like a lever, small in size, massive in impact. Because once you win the morning, you stop living by reaction. You start living by design. And when that shift happens, the rest of your day doesn't just change. You do. Chapter 1. The War for Your First Hour. Before the sun rises, a war begins, silent, invisible, and decisive. It doesn't take place on a battlefield but in bedrooms and between bed sheets. The enemy is subtle, snooze buttons, scattered thoughts, and the soft, deceitful comfort of delay. Most don't even realize they've lost the day before they've stood up. But the first hour? That's the battleground. And high performers? They know it's sacred ground. Imagine a general planning a campaign. Would he begin the day by asking his enemies what to do? Of course not. But that's exactly what happens when someone rolls over and checks their phone. Notifications become marching orders. Headlines dictate mindset. Social media sets the emotional tone. Instead of commanding the day, most people surrender to it, before brushing their teeth. But not everyone. There's a growing tribe who treats the first hour like a throne. Not because they're morning people by nature, but because they understand leverage. They know that how you begin influences how you continue. One intentional hour isn't just time management, it's identity declaration. It's standing up and saying, "This is who I am, and this is how I move." The science backs it. Studies show that early day decisions carry a ripple effect on cognition, focus, and emotional regulation. The prefrontal cortex, responsible for planning and decision-making, is most refreshed in the morning. That's when you're sharpest, clearest, most primed for discipline. Waste that window, and you don't just lose time, you lose precision. But the war isn't about waking up early. It's about waking up on purpose. For some, that's 5 a.m. For others, it's 8. The clock doesn't matter as much as the commitment. What matters is claiming that first hour for things that fortify you. Movement. Reflection. Prioritization. Stillness. Mental fuel. Anything that sharpens the blade before the day's battles begin. High performers guard this time like their life depends on it, because in a way, it does. It's not just about productivity. It's about self-leadership. When you decide how the day starts, you remind yourself that you're in command. That you're not a passenger in your own life. That you don't follow energy, you generate it. The real enemy isn't a late alarm or lack of time. It's passivity. It's drifting into the day without direction. That drift feels innocent but steals everything: clarity, control, confidence. And the scariest part? You rarely notice it's happening. One distracted morning becomes 2, then 5, then a life shaped by default, not design. Winning the first hour doesn't require a 12-step routine. It requires awareness. It requires identity. Because your habits don't just follow your identity, they reinforce it. If you see yourself as the kind of person who owns the morning, you act accordingly. And the more you act accordingly, the stronger that identity becomes. It's a loop, the kind that rewires your life. So tomorrow, the war begins again. The bed will be warm. The phone will be tempting. The world will invite you to start reacting. But you'll remember that hour isn't neutral. It's a throne or a trap. You'll choose the throne. Not because it's easy, but because it's who you are becoming. And in time, the war becomes less of a struggle. Not because the battlefield disappears, but because the warrior has changed. The first hour is a psychological battleground that shapes the entire day. Reactivity steals identity. Intention restores it. Owning the morning doesn't require a perfect routine, just purposeful action. Where in your life are you surrendering the first hour to distraction instead of claiming it with intention? Tonight, decide in advance how you'll spend your first hour tomorrow. Write it down. Guard it like your future depends on it, because it does. Chapter 2. You wake up as who you believe you are. Before a single decision is made, before the feet hit the floor, before the mirror reflects anything back, identity is already whispering its orders. Whether consciously crafted or unconsciously inherited, the beliefs you hold about yourself begin speaking the moment you wake. And without realizing it, you obey. A person who believes they're inconsistent won't fight the snooze button for long. One who sees themselves as sluggish will validate it in how they move. But someone who sees themselves as focused, as disciplined, as a builder of meaningful mornings, that person wakes with a different tone. The action isn't the starting point, identity is. The real difference between high performers and everyone else is not willpower. It's self-perception. Your behavior is the echo of who you think you are. This is why so many people failed to maintain new habits. They tried to graft new behaviors onto an old identity. It's like trying to run new software on outdated hardware. The system crashes. The alarm gets snoozed. The journal goes untouched. And they wonder why change won't stick. Identity-first habits reverse that pattern. Instead of trying to do what a disciplined person would do, you begin by saying, I am a disciplined person. And then you prove it, not perfectly, but persistently. Small actions become identity votes. You don't become something all at once. You become it by casting those votes, day after day, until the evidence becomes undeniable. It's not about lying to yourself. It's about leading yourself. If you want to change how your day unfolds, start by changing how you define yourself. Wake up with words that align with who you intend to be. Not affirmations you don't believe, but declarations you're willing to embody. Identity is sticky. That's why people cling to labels, even harmful ones. I'm just not a morning person. I've never been organized. I'm always behind. These aren't statements of fact, they're permission slips to stay stuck. Every time you repeat them, you rehearse the role. And every morning, you re-enter the script. But here's the truth, identity is not fixed. It's chosen. Not in grand moments of inspiration, but in small acts of ownership. You don't need to feel like a focused person to start acting like one. In fact, feelings often follow action. Decide first. Move second. The belief will catch up. A new identity begins with a simple phrase. I am the kind of person who... fill in the blank. I am the kind of person who gets up when the alarm goes off. Who spends the first hour with purpose. Who starts the day from clarity, not chaos. Don't wait until it's effortless to claim that identity. Claim it now, and back it up with one aligned decision. When you wake up tomorrow, you'll do what you've trained yourself to do. Not just physically, but mentally. You'll look through the lens of who you believe you are. That lens will color every choice. So shift the lens. Not by force, but by focus. Because in the end, identity isn't just who you are. It's who you wake up as. And if you change that, you change everything. Morning behavior reflects identity, not just discipline. Habits stick when they align with self-perception. Identity is shaped by small, repeated actions, not feelings. What identity have you been waking up with, and is it serving the future you want? Write the phrase I am the kind of person who, and complete it with the identity you want to live into tomorrow morning. Read it aloud before bed, and act on it when the day begins. Chapter 3. Discipline over delay, winning the alarm clock game. The first battle of the day is not with time. It's not with to-do lists or traffic or tasks. It's with yourself. More specifically, with the version of you that prefers comfort over commitment. That version hides in the warmth of the covers, negotiating with the alarm clock, whispering rationalizations in a half-awake voice. 5 more minutes. 10. Just a little longer. But make no mistake, that is not rest. That is retreat. The snooze button seems harmless. It offers the illusion of extra rest without consequence. But underneath, it carries a message: delay wins. And once delay wins once, it doesn't stop there. It bleeds into the next decision and the next. That's how momentum is lost, not in big failures, but in small, silent surrenders. High performers understand something most overlook. How you respond to the alarm sets the tone for how you respond to everything else. Do you rise when it's hard? Or do you wait until it's convenient? Discipline doesn't start in the gym or the office. It starts in the dark, in the quiet, when no one's watching. It starts when you keep your word to yourself, even when comfort calls louder than your goals. Research in behavioral psychology shows that delaying an action, even by a few minutes, reduces the likelihood of it happening at all. That's because hesitation activates the brain's risk sensors. The longer you wait, the more your brain searches for reasons not to follow through. The delay becomes resistance. And resistance becomes routine. The solution is not about becoming a machine. It's about becoming decisive. Get up when you said you would. Not because it feels good, but because it's who you are. That simple act, rising without negotiation, is not about sleep. It's about self-trust. Every time you do it, you reinforce that your word holds weight, even when no one is listening. But discipline is not about aggression. It's about preparation. Winning the alarm clock game begins the night before. Set your environment to serve your future self. Place the alarm across the room. Lay out your clothes. Decide your morning actions ahead of time. Remove friction before it creates excuses. The goal is not to make waking up easy, it's to make it automatic. You don't need to become a 5 a.m. warrior unless your life calls for it. What matters is consistency. Wake up at the time that aligns with your season, your goals, and your energy rhythm, but then own that time without compromise. Wake up when you said you would, and let that be your first win of the day. Every morning offers a small but powerful invitation. Do you lead your life, or do you wait for it to happen to you? The snooze button is a delay tactic in disguise. And in a world that's already full of distractions and detours, the last thing you need is to start the day by practicing hesitation. Discipline is not a trait you're born with. It's a choice you make repeatedly. And the first opportunity to make it shows up before your feet hit the floor. Accept that challenge, and you won't just wake up earlier, you'll wake up stronger. Hitting snooze trains the mind to delay, not decide. Morning discipline begins with decisive action, not perfect conditions. Preparation reduces friction and increases follow-through. What message are you sending yourself when you delay getting up, and what message do you want to send instead? Tonight, set your wake time and place your alarm out of reach. When it goes off, get up immediately. No debate. No delay. Win the moment. Chapter 4. The Movement Mandate. Wake the body, wake the mind. Before the day makes demands, your body sends signals. It doesn't ask for intensity. It asks for initiation. Movement, even in its simplest form, is the fastest way to tell your brain that the day has begun and that you're ready to meet it with energy, not ease. It's not about exercise for aesthetics or performance, it's about motion as momentum. When you move, everything changes. Blood flow increases. Oxygen surges. Hormones like dopamine and serotonin elevate your mood and sharpen your thinking. The fog clears. The mind begins to focus. That's not coincidence, it's biology. And for those who understand this, movement becomes non-negotiable, not because it's a task, but because it's a tool. The first hour of your day is not just mental real estate, it's physical territory. And how you inhabit your body determines how you inhabit your mind. A sluggish body signals delay. A moving body signals readiness. High performers don't wait to feel awake. They move to become awake. They don't wait for energy. They generate it. This doesn't require a gym membership or a 10K run. It can be as simple as a walk around the block, 5 minutes of stretching, or bodyweight movements in your living room. The point is not what you do, it's that you do something. The body is built to move, and when it does, the mind follows. Consider the concept of embodied cognition, the idea that the body doesn't just reflect thought but actually shapes it. When you stand tall, your confidence increases. When you walk briskly, your motivation rises. When you breathe deeply, your stress lowers. Your body is not just along for the ride, it's driving the vehicle. Skipping morning movement is like starting a race without warming up the engine. Sure, you can go, but you'll be slower, stiffer, and more prone to breakdown. Movement primes your systems. It prepares you for focus, for clarity, for action. It's not indulgence. It's ignition. Many believe they need to feel motivated first. But motivation is the reward, not the requirement. Action precedes activation. When you move, you tell your entire system, we are shifting gears now. We are not drifting. We are not delaying. We are stepping into the day with purpose. The beauty of morning movement is that it scales to your life. There is no minimum threshold to receive the benefit. Just move. Start where you are. Let go of intensity and aim for consistency. 5 minutes can change your state. 10 minutes can change your outlook. And 20 can transform your capacity. There's also a deeper layer. Movement isn't just physical, it's symbolic. It's the first proof to yourself that you are not passive. That you are taking ownership of how you begin. In a world that often pulls you in every direction, morning movement becomes your declaration. I lead this life. I move first. As the world sleeps, you rise not just from bed, but into yourself. And with every step, stretch, or breath, you reinforce the identity you're building. Because the person who moves first doesn't wait for life to happen, they meet it in motion. Morning movement primes the brain and body for energy and focus. Action precedes motivation, move first, and clarity follows. Physical motion reinforces mental momentum and identity. What's one simple form of movement you can integrate into your first hour to shift your state from passive to powerful? Choose a 5-minute movement for tomorrow morning. Commit to it now, no overthinking, no perfection. Just move. Let motion lead the day. Chapter 5: Aim before action. Set your day's true north. A person can work all day and still end up nowhere if they never asked where they were going. Activity without direction is just motion. It fills time, consumes energy, and creates the illusion of progress. But direction? That's what turns action into advancement. And the first hour of your day is the best time to choose that direction. Before the demands of the world rush in, before inboxes open and meetings begin, there is a brief window where you are free to aim. Most waste it by reacting. They wake up and immediately engage with everything external. The news. Notifications. Requests. It's like beginning a road trip by handing someone else the map. Suddenly, the day belongs to everyone but you. But high performers start differently. They know the difference between activity and alignment. They begin by clarifying what matters most. That doesn't mean they plan every hour. It means they decide what the day is for. They choose their targets. They establish what a win looks like. They point their inner compass before they start moving. Clarity in the morning sharpens every decision that follows. When you know your aim, distractions become obvious. Opportunities can be evaluated quickly. Your energy is spent with intention, not scattered in 10 directions. Aim acts as a filter. It helps you say no without guilt, and yes without hesitation. This process doesn't need to be complicated. Sometimes it's one question: what is the one thing I must move forward today? Other times it's reviewing a list of priorities and selecting the top 3. It could be journaling a short intention or visualizing the kind of person you want to be in the day ahead. The goal isn't to fill time, it's to create focus. Cognitive science tells us that the brain values completion. When you start the day by defining a meaningful target, your mind will subconsciously work to close that loop. It will look for ways to move the goal forward. This is called the Zeigarnik effect. Unfinished tasks hold mental real estate. But that's only useful when the task is intentional. Otherwise, the mind stays cluttered with urgency instead of clarity. Setting your aim also reinforces identity. A person who defines their priorities each morning acts like a leader, not a follower. They step into the day with purpose, not panic. They don't need a crisis to focus them. They choose focus on their own terms. This doesn't mean the day will unfold perfectly. Interruptions will come. Plans will shift. But aim isn't about control. It's about orientation. When the winds change, you adjust the sails, but you still know where you're going. Without that aim, every distraction feels urgent. With it, every choice has context. There's a quiet confidence that forms when you start the day with intention. You're no longer pulled by whatever shouts the loudest. You move by what matters. And that shift, from noise to North Star, changes everything. Because when you aim first, action becomes a statement, not a reaction. So tomorrow, before the world arrives with its demands, sit with yourself and ask, what matters most today? Not what's most pressing, but what's most important. Then align your actions with that answer. Aim before you act, and you won't just get more done, you'll get the right things done. Action without direction leads to burnout, not breakthrough. Morning clarity helps filter distractions and prioritize what matters. Aim reinforces identity and turns movement into meaningful progress. What is the one outcome that, if achieved today, would make the day feel like a win? Tomorrow morning, before doing anything else, write down your top priority for the day. Let that become your compass before the noise begins. Chapter 6: Guarding the Gates. Choosing what enters first. The mind is a gate, and every morning you are the gatekeeper. What you allow in during the first hour doesn't just inform your thinking, it forms your thinking. The early inputs shape the lens through which you see the rest of the day. And yet, most people leave that gate wide open, letting in noise, distraction, and emotional turbulence before they've had a chance to anchor themselves. The moment the phone lights up, the battle begins. A message from work. A headline designed to provoke. A feed full of comparison. These aren't just harmless glances. They are mood setters, thought shapers, attention stealers. And once they're in, they don't leave quietly. They color your focus, distort your priorities, and load your mind with other people's agendas before you've even touched your own. High performers don't let the outside world set the tone of their inside world. They understand that focus is fragile, especially in the early hours. What enters the mind early tends to linger. That's why they protect that window like a sanctuary. It's not about hiding from reality. It's about choosing to enter the world from a place of strength, not scattered reaction. Neuroscience tells us that the brain is in a theta and alpha state shortly after waking. These are the brainwaves associated with creativity, learning, and absorption. In this window, the mind is most programmable, most susceptible to influence. This is not the time to hand the keys to strangers on a screen. It's the time to feed your mind with intention. This doesn't mean isolation. It means curation. It means selecting what enters with purpose. Maybe it's a passage from a book, a moment of prayer, a few minutes of silence, or an inspiring podcast. The method doesn't matter as much as the motive. What are you allowing in, and is it aligning you or agitating you? You are constantly being formed by what you consume. Information becomes interpretation. Interpretation becomes reaction. Reaction becomes routine. If you start the day with chaos, don't be surprised when you carry that chaos forward. But start the day with clarity, and you carry something entirely different, direction. Guarding the gates also applies to your environment. Is your space quiet or cluttered? Is your phone the first thing you touch, or is it your journal? Even the smallest habits send signals to your mind about what matters most. And in the absence of intentional signals, the mind defaults to whatever is loudest. To guard the gates is to reclaim authority. It's to stop letting algorithms decide what gets your attention first. It's to stop handing your mood to the headlines. It's choosing to shape your mental state instead of reacting to whatever enters it. The first hour is not the time to scroll. It's not the time to answer. It's the time to tune in, not plug in. The time to listen inward, not just react outward. Because when you begin by aligning yourself internally, the rest of the day moves from a different place, calmer, stronger, clearer. You don't need to do it perfectly. You just need to do it consciously. Guard the gate. Choose what enters. Because once you've opened that door, the tone is set. And it's much easier to protect peace than to recover it. Early inputs shape the mental and emotional tone of your day. The brain is most impressionable in the first hour. Cure it wisely. Guarding your mental gates builds focus, clarity, and self-leadership. What input have you been letting in first, and what would it look like to replace it with something intentional? Tomorrow morning, delay checking your phone or consuming any media for at least 30 minutes. Instead, choose one intentional input that aligns with your identity and goals. Chapter 7: Identity Anchors, Rituals that Reinforce Who You Are. Every action you take in the first hour of your day is a vote for the person you believe yourself to be. These actions, repeated daily, become more than habits. They become identity anchors, rituals that hold you steady, even when the rest of the day threatens to pull you off course. And unlike routines, which are often task-based, rituals are meaning-based. They don't just structure your time. They shape yourself. An identity anchor is a decision to embody who you want to become, before the world has a chance to decide for you. It's not about performance. It's about alignment. These rituals serve as signals, to yourself and your subconscious, that you are choosing your character before your calendar. For some, it's making the bed with precision. For others, it's lighting a candle before journaling, or sipping coffee while reviewing goals. These acts are small, but their impact is not. They whisper, "This is who I am." When repeated with intention, they reinforce consistency, confidence, and clarity. Not because they are big gestures, but because they are deliberate ones. Psychologists call this behavioral congruence. When your actions match your self-concept, identity strengthens. But when your habits contradict who you say you are, friction grows. Doubt creeps in. And over time, that doubt becomes a narrative. This is why rituals matter. They close the gap between intention and identity. They become your way of voting for your future self, one morning at a time. The most effective morning rituals are not copied, they're crafted. They reflect your values, your energy rhythms, and your goals. They are not something you perform to earn worth. They are something you practice to express worth. You don't need 10 steps. You need a few that matter. When a ritual becomes anchored to identity, it creates stability. No matter how unpredictable the day ahead, you begin with something familiar and empowering. That stability becomes strength. Athletes call it a pre-game routine. Artists call it a warm-up. Leaders call it grounding. But all of them are doing the same thing, tapping into rhythm to unlock readiness. Without these anchors, mornings drift. One missed day becomes 2, then a week, then a relapse into reactivity. But with identity-anchored rituals, even when motivation fades, muscle memory kicks in. You don't need to feel inspired. You just follow the pattern. And as you do, you reinforce the story, "I am a person who shows up." Rituals also remind you that progress is found in repetition, not novelty. You don't need to keep reinventing your morning to feel productive. You need to trust the process. The magic is in the mundane. Brushing your teeth doesn't feel profound, but it shapes your health. Likewise, 5 minutes of journaling, breathing, or movement might feel small, but it forms a foundation. This is how identity is shaped, by doing what the future version of you would do, until it no longer feels like effort. It feels like you. The real power of a ritual is not in what it adds to your schedule. It's in what it affirms about your story. And every morning gives you a fresh chance to write that story again. So choose your anchors wisely. Let them reflect who you are becoming, not who you've been. Because each morning you practice them, you remind yourself, "This is my identity, and I'm living it on purpose." Rituals are identity anchors that reinforce who you are becoming. Small, intentional actions build behavioral congruence and self-trust. Progress is found in repetition, rituals create consistency without decision fatigue. What simple morning ritual could you adopt to anchor your identity and start the day in alignment? Design one identity-based ritual for your first hour tomorrow. Keep it simple, repeatable, and meaningful, and commit to practicing it daily for the next 7 days. Chapter 8: Momentum by Design: How Small Wins Stack Fast. Momentum doesn't come from chance. It comes from intention. It's not a lucky streak or a mysterious force reserved for the naturally motivated. It's a chain reaction, started by small wins that accumulate faster than we expect. And the first hour of your day is the most powerful time to design that chain. The human brain loves progress. It craves movement forward, no matter how small. Each completed task delivers a dopamine hit, a chemical reward that says, "You're doing something that matters." The size of the task doesn't matter as much as the signal it sends. That's why making your bed or drinking a glass of water first thing can actually help fuel a productive day. It's not about the task. It's about the momentum. Most people wait for motivation to act. But high performers act to generate motivation. They don't wait for a mood. They create motion. One step leads to the next. The second feels easier because the first already happened. Energy compounds. Confidence builds. And suddenly, they're in motion, not because the conditions were perfect, but because they started. This is the secret. Success is not one big decision. It's a series of small ones stacked consistently. The power isn't in complexity. It's in compounding. You drink water, stretch, review your goals, and you feel sharp. You journal one insight, and you feel focused. You choose not to check your phone, and you protect your clarity. None of these on their own feel like breakthroughs. But together, they create a wave you can ride into the rest of your day. Momentum by design means you no longer depend on external pressure to move. You build systems that make movement natural. You create cues, rhythms, and environments that make action easier than inaction. The morning becomes less about forcing yourself to do things and more about flowing into who you already decided to be. Think of a flywheel, heavy, hard to move at first, but once spinning, almost unstoppable. Your morning is that flywheel. It starts slowly, with friction. The first movement feels small. But each deliberate win adds speed. By the time the rest of the world catches up, you're already in motion. You've built velocity that others are still trying to find. Momentum also builds belief. When you start stacking wins, your brain rewrites the narrative about who you are. It shifts from, "I'm trying to be productive," to, "I am someone who follows through." And once that identity clicks, the effort becomes easier. You no longer need to convince yourself to show up. You expect it. But momentum can work in reverse too. Ignore the small wins, and you start stacking losses. Hit snooze, skip movement, scroll endlessly, and suddenly you're not just behind on time, you're behind on energy. That's why guarding your first hour matters so much. It's not just about managing time. It's about managing trajectory. Designing momentum is about being deliberate with the first 5 to 10 minutes. Pick 2 or 3 actions you can complete easily. Not for the sake of checking a box, but for the sake of signaling direction. You're moving. You're leading. You're building something worth continuing. Momentum isn't magic. It's motion multiplied. It doesn't wait for you to feel ready. It responds to your willingness to begin. Stack small wins. Protect them. Repeat them. Let them carry you. Because one win leads to another. And a day full of wins starts with the very first one you choose. Momentum is built through small, repeatable wins, not massive efforts. Early actions trigger motivation and sharpen identity. Morning design creates natural momentum that carries into the rest of the day. What small win can you consistently start your day with that would shift your energy and mindset? List 3 small actions you can complete within the first 10 minutes of tomorrow morning. Commit to doing them in sequence to build early momentum. Chapter 9: Reclaiming the Morning After a Bad One. Even the most disciplined person has off days. The alarm gets ignored. The routine gets skipped. The morning feels scattered, heavy, or simply wasted. And in that moment, the temptation is strong to let the entire day follow suit. But one misstep doesn't define the path. A bad morning isn't a sentence, it's an invitation. The invitation is to reclaim, not retreat. Failure in the first hour isn't the problem. The real danger lies in the story that follows it. I've already blown it. Today's ruined. I'll start over tomorrow. These aren't reflections. They're exits. They offer false relief in exchange for real progress. And they delay growth by turning a single stumble into a downward spiral. Reclaiming the day means refusing to let the first mistake write the rest of the script. It's the decision to pivot, not punish. To course correct, not collapse. One poor start doesn't erase your identity. It simply reveals where the work still lives. And that awareness is fuel, not failure. Momentum is powerful, but so is recovery. High performers aren't those who never falter, they're the ones who recover quickly. They've trained themselves not to wallow in guilt but to return to center. A skipped ritual, a chaotic hour, a rushed morning, none of these have the power to ruin your day unless you hand them the pen. Instead of spiraling, simplify. Ask, what's the next right move? Maybe that means stopping to take 5 deep breaths. Maybe it's writing down your top priority at 10 a.m. instead of 6 o'clock. Maybe it's choosing to walk during lunch to reset your focus. Reclaiming doesn't require perfection. It requires permission to reset, realign, and return. The nervous system is responsive. When you pause to center yourself, even for a moment, you signal safety. You tell your body, we're not out of control. We're just adjusting. This physiological reset lowers stress, boosts focus, and gives you access to clarity. You don't have to get everything back. You just have to get back in motion. There's also power in pattern interruption. Sometimes, the best way to reclaim a disrupted morning is not to recreate what was lost but to create something new. Change the environment. Go outside. Shift locations. Listen to a different sound. These small disruptions break the mental loop of discouragement and give the brain a fresh slate. Reclaiming also means releasing the shame. Guilt consumes energy. Ownership restores it. You're not the person who failed. You're the person who noticed and responded. That shift in self-perception is everything. You stop seeing setbacks as identity statements and start seeing them as moments. And moments can be redirected. This is why the first hour matters so much. It gives you a clear reference point. When it goes well, you feel it. When it doesn't, you notice. That awareness is not a weakness. It's a signal of growth. You're no longer numb to the drift. You care enough to correct. And that care is a form of leadership. A bad morning doesn't mean the rest of the day is lost. It means the next decision matters more. Reclaim the hour. Reclaim the mindset. Reclaim the identity. Not later. Not tomorrow. Now. Because the day isn't over. And neither are you. A bad start doesn't have to become a bad day. Quick recovery is a strength that can be trained. Reclaiming the day starts with the next small decision, not perfection. How do you typically respond to a disrupted morning, and what response would better serve your growth? Create a simple, reset ritual for the next time your morning goes off track. One action. One breath. One decision. Use it to interrupt the spiral and reclaim the day. Chapter 10. Consistency over complexity. Build a habit that lasts. Most people overestimate what they can do in a day and underestimate what they can sustain for a year. They chase routines filled with complexity, drawn in by novelty and ambition. But complexity is fragile. It collapses under pressure. And when it does, the habit doesn't just break, it vanishes. What lasts isn't impressive. It's consistent. The morning routine that changes your life won't be the one that's the most extreme. It will be the one you return to, even on hard days. Even when motivation fades. Even when you travel, get sick, feel off, or face chaos. Because when a habit is simple enough to repeat, it becomes strong enough to stay. The brain loves patterns. It craves predictability. That's how habits form, through repetition, not intensity. Every time you perform an action in the same context, you strengthen the neural pathway that supports it. But when you complicate the process, the friction increases. And friction is the enemy of follow-through. That's why most people start strong and then stall. They try to do too much, too fast. 10 new morning habits. An hour-long routine. A schedule that looks good on paper but collapses in real life. It's not that they lack discipline, it's that they built something too complex to survive in consistency. High performers know better. They build with the long game in mind. They start small, master the movement, and then layer slowly. Their routines are scalable, not rigid. When life gets full, they don't abandon the habit, they adapt it. A 10-minute ritual becomes 5. A walk replaces a workout. Silence replaces journaling. The core remains. This is the secret to consistency. Make it flexible enough to live inside real life. Don't aim for perfect. Aim for repeatable. Make it so simple that it's harder not to do. You don't need a flawless start. You need a faithful one. Even if it's just 2 minutes of breath, 1 line in a journal, or 5 push-ups beside the bed, it counts. It keeps the loop alive. James Clear, author of Atomic Habits, calls this the 2-minute rule. Scale any habit down to 2 minutes to make it doable. This isn't cheating. It's strategy. Because 2 minutes of action often leads to more. But even if it doesn't, you've still won. You've cast a vote for your identity. You've practiced your rhythm. You've stayed in motion. The compound effect of small, consistent actions is staggering. 1 simple morning habit done daily is more effective than 10 habits done inconsistently. Consistency builds trust with yourself. Every time you show up, you reinforce the belief, I follow through. That belief is the foundation of every transformation. There's also freedom in simplicity. When your routine is manageable, it doesn't feel like a burden. It feels like a rhythm. You don't dread it. You return to it. And when life throws curveballs, you have something solid to return to. Something that grounds you, orients you, reminds you who you are. This is how legacies are built, not in grand moments, but in quiet repetitions. In the decision to keep showing up. In the humility to keep it simple. Because what changes your life isn't what you do occasionally with intensity. It's what you do consistently with intention. Simplicity scales. Consistency compounds. And in the end, it's not the complexity of your habits that defines your success. It's your ability to keep coming back to them. Complexity breaks under pressure, simplicity survives. Habits that last are repeatable, adaptable, and grounded in identity. Consistency, not intensity, is what transforms behavior into identity. Where have you overcomplicated your morning habits, and what would it look like to simplify them? Choose 1 morning habit and shrink it down to its 2-minute version. Commit to doing it daily for the next 7 days, no matter what. Chapter 11, The Identity Loop, Becoming the Person Who Doesn't Quit. The goal was never just to build a morning routine. It was to build a new identity. Not an identity based on fleeting motivation or borrowed strategies, but one forged in action, anchored in purpose, and proven by repetition. Because the person who owns their first hour doesn't just have better mornings, they become someone who leads their life instead of following it. The most powerful habits are not fueled by discipline alone. They're fueled by identity. When you see yourself as someone who follows through, you do. When you believe you are focused, you act accordingly. This is the identity loop. Every action reinforces belief, and every belief shapes the next action. Around and around it goes, not in theory, but in real, repeatable motion. Too many people try to change their lives by changing their behavior, but skip the part where they change how they see themselves. They try to install habits like software without upgrading the operating system. Eventually, the system crashes. Because effort will always buckle under the weight of a weak identity. But you've taken a different path. You've seen that the first hour isn't just a tactic, it's a mirror. It reflects who you believe you are. It gives you a platform to act from intention instead of instinct. Each morning, you cast votes for the kind of person you're becoming. Each action tells a story. I'm someone who leads. I'm someone who shows up. I'm someone who doesn't quit. And that story, told enough times, becomes true. Not because you declared it, but because you lived it. Identity is sticky. Once it's formed, it resists contradiction. That's why the real victory is not doing the habit, it's becoming the person who does it by default. You don't have to wrestle with the alarm clock because you're someone who gets up. You don't debate whether to move because you're someone who moves. You don't ask if it's worth guarding your input because you're someone who protects clarity. The first hour becomes more than a tool, it becomes a training ground. Every morning you rehearse who you are. And when you do that long enough, your identity stops needing reinforcement. It begins to lead you. And that's when the loop becomes powerful. Because now, identity doesn't just follow behavior. It fuels it. This loop works both ways. Drift too long, and you reinforce an identity of avoidance. That's why recovery is essential. You interrupt the loop. You remember who you are. You act your way back into alignment. No shame. Just return. That's what the person who doesn't quit does, not because it's easy, but because they've made a decision. The decision isn't to be perfect. It's to be consistent. To keep showing up. To keep casting votes for the version of yourself that lives with intention. And over time, the loop strengthens. The wins compound. The identity becomes unshakable, not because you never missed, but because you never stopped. You've walked through the war for the first hour. You've discovered the power of intention, movement, clarity, protection, and simplicity. But more than anything, you've learned that habits aren't about doing more. They're about becoming more focused, more grounded, more aligned with who you're here to be. The first hour belongs to you now. Not as a task to complete, but as a space to claim. And every time you do, you remind yourself, this is who I am. You don't need to chase motivation anymore. You've built momentum. You don't need to hope for consistency. You've designed it. You don't need to try to become the kind of person who doesn't quit. You already are. Identity shapes behavior, and behavior reinforces identity. The first hour is a proving ground for who you believe you are. True transformation happens when habits become expressions of identity. What identity have you solidified through your first hour habits, and how will you continue to strengthen it? Write a personal identity statement that reflects who you are becoming. Read it each morning for the next 30 days to reinforce the loop you've built. Take care and be well.